Hello, Peter Hewitt, la-artistino. Today I've got another tutorial for you. Now, as you've seen by my past work, I like to use a variety of different mediums when I colour. I like coloured pencils, I like using the Inktense pencils and watercolours, but I also love to use a combination of markers and pencils. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate for you today. If you want to know what I mean, here are some past examples that you may recognise. This is the sort of thing I'm going to show you, how to combine the markers and the pencils and a couple of other mediums to get a lovely effect. Now, the books I'm using that I recommend, because I'm going to be using alcohol markers this time round, are books that are printed only on one side, such as what you see most commonly with these Amazon books. There's a couple of mine. There's Manic Botanic. I haven't actually reviewed that one. I'll have to do that. And I've got examples in here that I'll show you of how I've done that. Again, you may recognise this. This is another one combining markers with pencils and a white gel pen. The other books that this work really well in are the Creative Haven series. These are the 4 that I own. And again, these are printed on one side. And I've done things like, let's see, this one. This one uses this technique with the markers and the pencils. I've also thrown in a little bit of gel pen in there too, the sparkly ones as well. And here's one, whoops, back, when I find it. This one is one that is in progress at present using this technique. So the Amazon printed books, one-sided, and the Creative Haven books are great for this. Any book that's printed on one side will be good. You can use the books that are printed on both sides, but you must understand that if you're using alcohol markers and some books with the watercolour markers, that there will be bleed through and your picture on the other side may be disfigured by it. The book that I've chosen to do this demonstration in is Hannah Lynn's Enchanted Faces. I haven't used this book yet, but I have, as you've seen, coloured in her the bigger one that she produces. And I'm going to pick one of the pictures in here because they're nice and small and I can make a concise tutorial, but this isn't a tutorial just to colour in this style book. You can expand it to any book just using the same technique. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the products that we're going to use. Now, the pencils that I recommend for this technique are your Prismacolors. I've got the 72 pack here, which is wonderful. I've got a few others that I've bought open stock. I also think that the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils will be good. The reason I recommend these pencils is because they are opaque, which means when you colour in on them, the colours will mostly cover the whatever colour is underneath. Other pencils, such as the Derwent Artist pencils or even your Polychromos pencils, tend to be more see-through, so that when you colour over the top you can see a lot more of the colour underneath. And my idea is to produce shade and highlights, so that you'll need some level of opacity in your pencils to do that. And I find the Prismacolors actually work best for me. Now, the different sorts of markers that you can use I'll go into now. I have the Copic sketch markers. Now, these are ridiculously expensive and I own them only because I've been collecting them over, well over a decade. So slowly, bit by bit, and that's how I've managed to accumulate so many. They are probably the most expensive of the alcohol markers and they are lovely. They have got the nice brush tip, which I highly recommend that whichever marker you use, that it has got a lovely thick tip, whether it's the brush tip or the original ones with the chisel tip. Even that will work okay. Other markers that you can use, if alcohol markers, are the Spectrum Noir, which will work very well with them, and they're a lot cheaper than the Copics. They're fine. There's Electroset Pros. You have the Prismacolor alcohol markers. They will do nicely as well. I don't have any examples of these sorts of markers with me. The only ones I've collected are the Copics because they are expensive and I just wanted to conserve my money for those. Chameleons will work well. They're the ones that, you know, you touch the tip on the little loading end and you can lighten the ink so that you can get some nice gradients. You've seen those about, I'm sure. If you haven't, look up the Chameleon pens. They are wonderful. The Me Pixie, which is a cheaper version and are quite nice. The Touch Twin brush markers, which I think work out pretty much the same price as the Copics. And Tria markers as well, if you can get a hold of them. All of those are alcohol markers that'll work just as well. Now, if you want to go a little bit more down market, the Sharpies. these are my Sharpies. These will also work, but there are some limitations, and I'll let you know as we go what they are. Another similar brand to the Sharpies, well actually they're pretty much identical, the Big Markets. I like to have both because there are colours in the Markets that they don't have in the Sharpies, and the colours in the Sharpies they don't have in the Markets. And I was very lucky, I picked these up really, really cheap on sale at a supermarket. There's all my Sharpie colours, by the way. There's a lot of Sharpie, oops, not those ones, these ones. That's all the colours that I've managed to collect so far in the Sharpies. I've recently added to them, you might see these, and I'll just quickly show you these because you may have spotted them and wondered. This pack, this is the newest set of Sharpie markers that have just come out. I thought, oh, they look very similar to ones I've already got. I might just take them home and test them. Well, I did, and they are different. The red is a proper red. It's not an orange red, or it's a slightly orangish red, but it's not as dark as the other red, and it's not as orange as the other. The blue is more of a true blue. There's a nice pink there, which is a bit darker than the one I had before. But the real good one is the green, the lime green one. There's nothing like that so far in the Sharpies. I was really happy to get that. So if you see this set at your supermarket or your office works, and you're a Sharpie collector like I am, grab them. They are different. Okay, as I said, you can use these, you can use these, you can use any of the alcohol markers, but what if you have got watercolour markers? Well, you can also do it with watercolour markers. I have got a couple of here. I've got my tried and true Tombos. These ones are almost as expensive as Copic markers here in Australia. I think the alcohol markers will work better, but these have got the lovely brush tip, which I think is very important when you're doing this art if you don't want the streaky look. The only problem with watercolour markers is that they do tend to streak very quickly, and it's harder to get a nice smooth effect. I find I can with the Tombos. I have more difficulty with other cheaper alcohol markers, but play around and see what you get. Another water-based marker that you can use is the Micador Stylish Brush Markers. These are available in Australia. There are similar ones, different brands that you can get as well. Again, nice brush tip. I do recommend though that before you start that you find the scratch page at the back of your book. Go to the back page of your book, and hopefully the person who's published it has been very kind and left you with a spare page to play with, so that you can just experiment with the materials that you've got to make sure that you're going to get the sort of effect that you like before you apply it to your picture. So whatever markers you've had, have a play around on your scratch page first. It's the same paper as the rest of the book, so that you will know how it's going to react to the paper when you apply it to the actual pictures. Okay, let's get started. Now, a couple of other things that I will be using is a white gel pen. I've got a couple of white Signo Uniball gel pens here made by Mitsubishi. One of mine's getting a little bit old, so I've just got a backup here in case this one runs out. I'll just say here a little tip that I've found if you're having problems with the flow of your gel pens. I find that sometimes my gel pens work fine, but after some use they begin to get a little bit scratchy and a little bit hit and miss with the type of line that they produce. And I believe that is because where the ball is seated in its little saddle, when you're using it on top of wax pencils or anything with a little bit of wax or oil in it, that there may be a build-up of wax or oil around the ball. And I've found one way that sometimes works quite well to fix it is to take your pen, take the cap off, run it under hot water, just the tip, and then cool the water down so that it doesn't burn your hand, and then just scribble the ball, the tip, on the back of your thumb underneath warm water. And I find that clears all the debris that might have accumulated around the tip of the pen, and I find that I often can revive a pen that's a bit scratchy by using that technique. It doesn't always work, but I find it's most successful on a pen that's been great beforehand and suddenly gone a bit wonky on me. So, good tip, you can try it, see if it works for you. You might be able to salvage a pen and save yourself some aggro. Another thing that I'm going to use is a black marker. This is a little fine liner. It's this particular one is a Derwent Graphik fine line. You don't have to be this fancy. You can use any. You don't even have to worry about whether it's waterproof or not for the particular thing that I'm going to do with it. So any fine line or any marker with a smallish tip will do for that, what I'm planning. And let's see, of course, I recommend having an eraser. Hey, I got it right, eraser, just in case you made too much pencil and you want to rub it back a little bit. And of course, you will need a scratch piece of paper so that you can experiment with your colours, and a protective sheet. This paper that you'll find in the Creative Haven and the Amazon prints is quite thin, and using markers you're gonna end up with a horrible mess on your next page. So put your scratch piece in. I'm doubling mine over for this book, sometimes two if you feel like you're going to be a bit heavy-handed. I use it anyway because I don't like the indentions of my pencils going on to the next page either. I'll take that off. I'm going to use this picture, by the way, if you haven't guessed. And another thing, with this book being quite small and a bit difficult to get it to sit down, which, oh, actually it's not doing too bad now. I've been pushing it a lot. Ooh, I didn't notice. It's got serrations in it to make it easy to remove. I didn't say that in my review of it. I will correct that and say this book has got the little, you know, line there that you can easy tear line. Just notice that. Anyway, digressing. The other thing that you can do to keep your page flat is to get one of these guys, paper clips. Paper clip. Oh goodness, my words today. And just pop it on the top there to hold it flat for you. Okay, if you're having difficulty with some of the books getting them down flat. I don't know if I'll need that now, it's sort of flattened itself. Okay, I'll put that one to one side, I won't bother with that one, but it's a tip if you need it. And we'll get started. Now I'm going to start with the face, because I know this is a problem for a lot of people, how to do faces. In a previous video, I've done a face in Dagdrama, and I've done it very realistically, very slowly, using all the blues and the brown tones, etc., to make it the skin as realistic as, you know, as I wanted it to be for Dagdrama. And this is a very fantasy sort of picture, it's very cartoony, so I'm not going to go into that detail. So I'll show you a quicker way that you can do faces in this, with this type of cartoony style, that'll look just as good. And it's the same way that I did the face with my other girls in this book. Hang on, I'll just show you to review it so you know where I'm heading. This kind of face here. Okay, and first of all you want to pick a skin tone, and this is where the Sharpies, my Sharpie box, fall over, because unfortunately they really don't have a good skin tone. The big markets have a very light pale pink, which actually isn't bad at all. You could use that. It's a little bit darker than what I'd like. The Mikador Stylish brush markers have a really nice pale pink that you can use. It's a bit pinkier than what I would choose, but it will still do the job for you. The Tombow brush pens, these guys here, you've got some choice of the pinks. For me, some of them are a little bit too pink, some of them are a little bit too tan. I'm talking here about pale skin. They've got some great colours for darker skins, by the way. All of them pretty much do, except for Sharpies. Sharpies only have one brown, it's a dark brown, it's horrible. And of course, if you go to your alcohol markers, many of those have got in excess of 100 different colours, and you're sure to find a nice skin tone amongst that lot. Even if you predominantly just use Sharpies or the cheaper pens, it could be handy if you like to do faces to invest in a couple of skin toned alcohol markers just so you can do your skin tones. Yeah, I know they're a bit more expensive, but perhaps a couple of those without having to bother with the rest if you're happy colouring in with other types of markers. Anyway, the marker that I've chosen to colour the skin tone, after all that ramble, is a Copic sketch marker YROO powder pink. Now there's a variety of different Copic sketch markers, colours which will work wonderful with pale skins. I've got some here that I use regularly. These are my old style markers, but anything in the E range, which is the earth range, works really nice, or the YR range. Earth, that's like earth tones, that's just the very light ones work well. I've got barley beige, skin white, fruit pink. So just have a look at what you got or what you can get and choose from those. All of them look nice. Some of them will be a bit darker, some of them will be a bit lighter, but let's face it, everybody's skin's a different colour, so there's no perfect skin tone. Right, now about applying this. First of all, if you've got it, you'll want your brush tip. I really recommend, 99% of the stuff I do is with the brush tip because it's so nice and soft. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on her face now so that you can see clearly what I'm doing. Okay, here she is. Right, now the way I'm going to colour her in, because I want to make her, give her some eyeshadow, sparkly eyeshadow, I'm not actually going to colour over the eyes because I want a different colour to stand out and be very bright on there. So what I'll do is I'm going to colour in the rest of her face, and I'm going to attempt to give it a nice even coverage. There's a bit of patience and a bit of trick to this. You want to work fairly fast. You want to keep going with the leading edge of where you're working so you don't give it time to sink in and dry out. I'm just going to leave a little edge of her eyes there. Go down a little bit here for the edge of the inner eyes. Again, you want to work fairly quickly and not leave a telltale streak mark where the previous ink has dried. This is a bit more difficult with water-based markers, but you can do it. I know with the Tombows I can do it fairly successfully. So actually, as I said, it's worth investing in a few brush markers if you're going to do a lot of skin tones. As you can see, we've got a nice even coating to the face there. I'll let that dry. And another important tip, before you do anything else, let the first layer dry. The paper will love you for it and you'll get much better results. So while I'm letting her face dry, I might just continue on and do the rest of her body. These markers go on darker first and they tend to dry slightly lighter. So here I'm flicking a little bit to get a nice soft leading edge to avoid having a harsh line where the two different layers of marker or the two different edges of markers connect. There you go, and I've got a nice even edge there. Go on to do her chest here. Sort of start at little thin points where it's not going to be noticeable. If you're doing a large area, try and start at the thinnest point. So even though this is connected to this, because it's such a tiny little area, a little bit of overlap isn't going to be very noticeable. And let's see, I'll pull her arm up so you can see me doing her entire arm. I'm being careful to sort of any thin spots I'm just quickly going over before the ink has time to settle. This paper is very thirsty and will suck in a lot of ink, by the way, so with Copic markers, I suggest you go and grab a refill as well if you're doing a lot of people and using the Copic markers a lot. It makes the Copic markers very economical actually, and the original marker, depending on what country you're in, can cost anything from say $6 to, if you're really lucky that is, to, you know, $12 or so. But the refills are, well, for me they cost about $12, but your refill will refill your pen 25 times. So buying a pen and a refill is like buying 26 pens. Makes it far more economical than even the cheapest of the alcohol marker range. Now, another thing that I need to mention to you is you'll notice this paper, because it's so thirsty, this is where I was going last time, it bleeds easily. So if you go too close to the black lines, particularly if the black lines are fairly thin, they will bleed over into the next area which you want to keep white. So the way I avoid that is I get close to the edge but I don't exactly touch it, so it's just like a teeny tiny hair's breadth away, and that means that I'm allowing the pen to bleed but conserving the next area that I want to keep white. So be very light, careful on the edges, particularly if you're using a lot of dark wet colours, so that you don't get bleed through. Just be aware of that. You can always tap in a little bit more colours if you've left with a bit of white around the edges. You can always tap in a little bit more colour around the edges if you've still got a few white speckles at the borders. Now here we go, we'll do a belly too, why not, since we've got the marker out. Again, being careful to work fairly fastly and going back in any paler areas which hasn't had much ink, just quickly get some more ink onto it so the ink is still wet and it has time to set and dry and mingle with itself, so you're not left with any harsh lines. Okay, now I think, okay, now we've got the first layer of colour down. Just to recap, pop that out the way and make sure this is fairly dry. If it's a bit of a damp environment, you know, like if the humidity's up a little bit, I would leave it longer to dry because things take longer to dry when you've got high humidity. I think this is just about right. Now I'm going to pull out my pencils. Now to shade this girl, bring a few shadows into her face to give it a little bit more dimension, I've chosen a Prismacolor Peach colour. And it's a few shades darker than the powder pink Copic marker that I've used. And what I'm going to do with this is everywhere where there's going to be a little bit of shadow, I'm just going to lightly go over and just add a border of shadow in there and just smooth it out. As you can see, the pencil lies quite nicely on top. It's subtle. You don't want, I'm not into big bold things here. If I want a bolder looking shadow, I'd go for a muted blue like the Payne's Grey. But as this is more cartoony, I'm just going to stick with light colours, like keep it pretty coloured. So I'm going around just the base of her chin there, like so. Now a little bit just underneath her lower lip. So you've got a little shadow underneath her lower lip, a little smidge around where her nose is. Now with these pictures, I'm not going to define the shape of the nose. I don't think you need to with these particular pictures. If you want to do that, then you need to colour in the corners of the eyes and go down the sides of the nose to bring out the light of the nose. I'm also going to put a little bit of shadow just about, a fraction of a millimetre right underneath the eye there. Right, okay, and I'll just do a little bit just in the corners here, just to suggest that there's a bit of a dip there on either side of her nose, but I'm not going to make it too obvious. This is just suggestion, and blend it in with the surrounding Copic marker. Okay, now I've given her face a little bit of definition there. Not a whole lot, but a little bit more. If you want to go darker, as I said, you can use the greyish blues, or if you want to be a bit more subtle, you can use a brown. Just experiment and see what works. I'll put a little bit of shadow underneath her neck there. And with the body, let's continue. We want a shadow underneath anywhere where there's going to be a shadow, like which is going to be furthest away from the light source, like around the side of her chest here, the underneath of her arm, so around the underside of her fingers, just a teeny little bit, and just blend it in. Just the inside of that. Inside of her shoulder there, just to show it dips in a little bit before it comes across the chest. This hand here, because it's poked around the back of her neck, you probably want to shade a shadow in most of it. Again, I'm talking specifically about this picture, but you can use this technique on any picture. I'm just telling you what to look out for, particularly when you're doing people. This technique, by the way, is not limited to pictures with people in it. You can do them with anything. Just keep in mind where your shadows are, where your highlights are, and use your pencils for that. You use your markers to lay down the basic colour, and your pencils to bring in the shadows and the highlights. Now this will leave a grainy effect, which I kind of like. You may not. If you don't like it, you can use a blender pencil to blend it all out and smooth it out. Colourless blender pencil so it doesn't interrupt the colour underneath. But I actually like this technique to have a grainy look with the pencils over top of the smooth markers. Okay, now we've got our ladies. shadows in. We'll do her cheeks. Now the colour I've chosen for her cheeks is this rather bold magenta. Now what you want to do here I'm following the style that Hannah Lynn does, which is to shade the cheeks, just the corners right underneath the eyes here. And you just want to start at the corner and bring it down, getting lighter and lighter as you head towards the centre of the face. So you don't really go past the edge of the eye here, and it's sort of like this cup shape here that you're after. Darkest at the corner and then gently shading it down. And when you finish the one side, move across and colour in the other side. Suggest just little circles and softly getting darker with successive layers. Now if you don't like the textured grainy look, you can always go over with a blender pencil to smooth it all out. I like the textured look, so I'm going to keep it. As a little touch with these particular girls, I like to do is I like to put a little bit of blush on the tops of the shoulders and on the elbows and on the knees. It's just something I like to do. It gives the body just a little bit more colour variation and interest. I don't go quite so dark, I just make it a really light little blush. It's a slightly sunburned or sun-touched look. Just got an elbow there, I don't have any knees or a shoulder there, I don't have any knees or elbows to do, so I'll just make it a little bit denser in the centre and just spread it out. The other thing that I like to do, which is just one of my little touches, is I take a white gel pen, make sure that it's running all right, and just make two little dots for shiny cheeks. And the same with the shoulders, elbows and knees, and it's just a little touch that I do to make it look a little bit more interesting. Now her eyes, I'm going to have a very dark blue, navy blue background, so I'm actually going to make her eyes sort of dark blue too. So I will start with a paler colour, so you can make with faces, you can make the eyes any colour you like, of course. Just keep in mind three colours, the lightest shade, the mid shade and the darkest shade. Start with the light shade and just put that down and leave a little bit right at the bottom there, white, just for the reflection. If you don't do that, you can always add it in later with a bit of gel pen. And then I'll go for a mid shade. If you want, you can just put the lightest shade down with your markers and then add your pencils over the top for your mid shade and your darker shade. That works just as well. I'll just do the mid shade, I think, with my marker. And this time I'm not going all the way down to the bottom, I'm only going down about a quarter of the way on each side, like that. I think for my darkest shade I will switch to my pencils because I like to keep a little bit of the texture in there too. So I've got this one, I've got the Copenhagen blue. That's quite nice and blue. I'll give her just the darkest shade right at the top. That gives you a nice looking dimension to the eyes. You can do this with pencil as well. So just a very simple way of having a nice effective looking eye. I'm just going to make most of that pupil black, and then I'll bring back the white dot when I add the white gel pen. There's just a little bit too much white in that pupil. Now I like to take the cool grey 50%, and I'm going to just add a little shading into the whites of the eyes, just around the top. Maybe a little bit too light, I might go a bit darker. Just so there's a shadow underneath where the top eyelid is, to recess the eye back into the face so it doesn't look like it's popping out at you. There, pick up the darker one, the 70% one, and just really, really lightly add just a tiny little bit more right to the top. There we go. Now those eyes look a bit more natural. And finally, once again, you can get your gel pens and pop some dots in. I'm just going to add a little dot here on the side of the pupil, like that. And then you can add another one next to it for an extra bit of sparkle. There, you got some nice sparkly eyes there. They look very much alive. And we'll do the lips. Now the lips again, you can reach for a suitably coloured marker. The Sharpies have got a nice range of pinks you can use, or if you want pink, you can have purple lips or green lips or any lips you like. I've got a Copic R32 here, which is a nice peach. It's not really peach, but anyway, it looks it. So I'm going to put a layer of that on first. Oh, it is pretty peachy on this paper. A simple trick for lips here, do them all the one colour, let the ink dry for a minute or two, and then make the top lip slightly darker. Put a little bit of darkness in the corners of the bottom lip, and then put a little highlight with a gel pen in the middle of the lip. I'll stick with the magenta, same colour that I did the cheeks. Once that's dry, just shade the top lip in a bit. Pencil doesn't work very well if the paper's still wet. There we go. So the top lip's shaded in, and just a little bit on the corners of the bottom lip, not too much, shade it in a little bit. This is very tiny, but it looks quite effective. And then take your gel pen again, and then put a couple of dots or lines there across the bottom lip. And there you go. That's some nice shiny looking lips. Oh, you know what, I will do the makeup now. I'm going to give her, I haven't quite decided on her colours yet, because the colour of her eyes shadow will reflect what colours I make the rest of her. Do you know what, let's go yellowy gold. Let's see now, what can we do with the yellowy gold? Once again, you can have a look through your Sharpies and see if you've got anything that'll suit. I'm going to go something really light. I think you're best, as always, starting off very pale. How's this one? That's a pale yellow Copic. So I will do all of it. Cover the whole surface with the yellow. Now, if you've got a next shade up that you can use, that's good. Otherwise, just go to your pencils to do what I do next. I'm going to add a little bit of darker yellow to it. You can do this either if you've got a slightly darker shaded marker, you can do that, or you can just go straight to your pencils. Now, what you want to do is you want to leave this center section here the lightest, and just darken this side and this side, with most of the darkness on this side here. So I'll put that in there, sort of like 2/3 of the way to halfway, and just a little bit on this side. Don't go too far. And on this side, more dark here. And I'll let that dry, and then I'm going to start playing with the pencils on it. Don't worry if you haven't got lots of different colours, just use your lightest one and then move to your pencils. I suggest grabbing a scratch piece of paper and just playing around with your colours until you get a combination that you like before you transfer it to the paper. I've got here a Goldenrod, a Prismacolor here. Okay, make sure that's dry, and then just add a little bit more right into this corner here to darken it off. And here. So I've got a nice kind of goldy look to the corners of the eyes. And just blush it in. Making sure that this centre bit you keep light. Now finally, with the eyes, let's go play with the gel pen again. Just make sure your gel pen's running, and what you want to do is just add some sparkle all over the eyes, so you look like you've got sparkly makeup on. Concentrate the sparkle in the lighter section, as that suggests that it's picking up the light, and just a few little dots in the darker sections. And if you go over something that you don't want the gel pen to be on, wait till it dries and you can scratch it off with your nail. There we go. Now she's got nice sparkly makeup on. Now I'm going to lash out and give her some green hair. Now, if you remember in my previous video on colouring hair, the trick is that you look for these bunches of hair, these, and think of it as ribbons. And you want the lightest part to be in the centre of these ribbons where they're sort of most exposed to the light, and then fade, gradually going into the darker parts as they sort of like go to the ends, or they sort of like end up underneath other pieces of the hair, so that you've got sort of dark, light, dark, and that's what we're going to aim for. Now with the markers, what you want to do ideally is to sort of merge this so it goes into a white colour very gradually. That's easier to achieve with the alcohol markers because you can use the flicking technique, and when I talk about a flicking technique, I'm talking about doing this with the brush tip where you flick, and as you can see it's dark on that side and lighter on that side. With the Sharpies, it's not so easy to achieve. As you can see, you end up with a consistent colour throughout, so you'll have to just, instead of making a solid colour, make little lines instead. There we go. And you can kind of get the same sort of a feel as well with the Sharpies. With your Tombos or other brush tipped watercolour pens, you can do the flicking technique a little bit. Not quite as effective as the alcohol markers, but not bad. Be careful with your water-based markers though. As you can see with some paper, it will pull the paper up. It'll start tearing away the surface skin of the paper if you lay it down too many times when it's still wet. You generally have to put one layer down and then add another layer over the top once the original layer is dry to avoid destroying the paper. I'm going to use my Copics. You don't have to, of course, if you can't do this with the markers you have, you can use the same technique, just colour with your pencils and don't worry about putting the marker underlay. So I'm going to start doing this. I'll work from the ends and just flick it into where it's going, where I want the highlight to be. Doing this very loosely. I'm not worrying about creating a masterwork of art here because I think the overall effect is what I'm after. Just being very careful to try not to go over the lines too many times, to retain these white highlights in the hair. Being particularly careful around the face. I really don't want to get green on her face, that would not look good. Do a centre section there, the green. Flick out this way to get the green down here. Copic markers are ridiculously expensive, but you can get exactly the same results with your chameleon markers or your Vectra Noir or your Prismacolor alcohol markers. Will do the same. They're a bit cheaper in the initial outlay. Very careful here because I'm colouring around her skin. I don't want green on her skin. Just when you think you've done all the hair, you see more of it, don't you? Yeah. I've just realised I haven't coloured in the inside forearm there. So I'll have to grab the skin tone and do that too. Okay, now if you've got a darker green in your markers that you want to use, you can now go over and do exactly the same thing but leave some of the initial lighter green showing. If you don't have that, you can go on and grab a darker green pencil and add your next layer of colour that way. Now I've got a apple green in the Prismacolors, and I'm going to use that to put in my next layer of colour. And I like to flick along the direction that the hair goes in. This isn't very much darker, is it? But you can still see. Again, make sure that your markers have completely dried before you start, otherwise you risk tearing up your paper. Oops, there's always something you miss. I'm going to do that skin actually, because that's bothering me. I'll go one shade darker. I don't have a huge amount of Prismacolors to choose from, but I'll go for the dark green. Now this one I just want to touch into right into the corners of the hair here, just where the tips meet the other hair. As you can see already, that's given it some added dimension. Just blend it in with the rest of the greens, so there's a nice smooth transition of colour. just about got the hair right there. Now it's the time to sort of like step back, look at your work, see if there's anything there you've missed or anything that just needs a touch up. And I can see here I've missed this little bit of hair just tucking in behind this large strand, so I'll just fill that one in. There. Now remember, if anything stands out and bothers you about your work, you can always go back and fix it up. I often find that if I do something and I'm sort of halfway through, I leave it overnight or for a couple of days, I'll come back to it and then something will just jump out at me that needs to be fixed. And it's something that I didn't see at the initial time I was doing it. So, no, that's fine. You can always go back in there and just fix up those little bits that aren't right. But I think we will just about leave her like that now. And what I'd like to do is, let's just move on to the background. Now, you can do the background all sorts of ways. You could have a colour gradient, going from one colour to another. You can make her glow, sort of like have a lighter colour around her and then a darker colour sort of towards the edges there. I'm just going to do something a bit different. I'm going to make a solid layer of one colour, and then I'm going to use the Prismacolors to create a little glow around her by using a lighter colour Prismacolor over the top of the marker, which I will be using for the background. Now the colour I've decided to do the background with, I'm going to move away from my Copics because I've been using them a lot, and I'll actually show you how the Sharpies go there. And I've got this very dark navy Sharpie which I'm going to use. Once again, these things bleed like crazy, so be very careful, I should say, when going close to the edge, because you may find it bleeds over, spiders over onto the white bits that you don't want contaminated with colour. So go lightly when you get to the edges, and if you're not happy with the first layer, wait till it dries and pop a second layer down. Now I find I can also, with the Tombos, with the big brush markers, I can also get a fairly good lay down of colour, but I've got to keep going back and backfilling anything that's a bit too light as I go before the ink has time to dry. So it's a bit of a, it's not so much a race against time, but just a time management thing where you're watching what you're doing and making sure that it's smooth as you go along. You don't wait till you finish the piece to go back and fill in all the bits that aren't dark enough or a bit patchy, because the ink will have dried and it won't be wet enough to sort of like meld in with itself and create a smooth, seamless finish. But I'll see how we go with this one. I've used the Sharpie before in backgrounds in these books, so I know that I can do a good job with them. So we'll start with just a little corners and bits here in the hair. This is going to be quite dark. And over here, I think we're going to lose some of the thinner strands that aren't coloured in this, because the black ink isn't super black. You see, Sharpie works fine on this. I'm just lightly tapping in as I go anything that looks a little bit too light or a bit patchy for me, because I want a nice dark even black background, or dark blue background I should say. Right, yep, as you can see, that's going to create a lovely smooth background for me. We'll go right up here. I'll start at the top and I'll work my way down the page. Now another thing that you might want to do is grab a, since you've already been working with the pencils on it, is pop a piece of paper under your hand so you don't smudge things around. You know, I'm the smudge queen, I love smudging my work, so I really need to put that piece of paper underneath. Now this line here, this print is very thin, so be careful not to go dark next to it or else you may bleed over. We might speed this bit up because it will get a bit boring, but as you can see, just watch and you'll see I'll do a quick bit there, and if I think, oh, that's too light and patchy, I'll quickly just fill it in before it has time to dry. And this also, as I said, works for the watercolour markers too. before it has time to dry so that it'll all be wet enough to merge into itself and create a nice solid finish. Quickly picking up anything and not allowing the edge of the dry too before I go back and put the next line in. Don't know if the camera will pick that up. Here you've got two lines that aren't smooth, so I'm just quickly backfilling it to smooth it out. Now, one thing I do find with these Sharpies, for some reason the really juicy ones spit on the page, so you might get a little bit of spit when you move fast. It's tiny little speckles of colour, so be especially careful around features you want to keep white. Now I've left that there because it's a little area there, and if I get a bit of a uneven colouring right there where the Sharpie, the later colouring crosses over into the older colouring, it won't matter so much for it because it's a tiny little spot. It's not going to be noticeable. I want to start over here and bring the Sharpies around this way. So I'll leave that right at the little narrow piece. It's not going to show too much. And I'll start back over here. Don't know why the Sharpies spit. I don't really have any, I have it with a bit markers, but I don't have any problem with any other alcohol markers. Or watercolour markers for that matter. These are pretty new Sharpies, some of them, so they are very juicy. One layer down, that's too thin, just backfill it quickly and then move on to the other layer. Really careful around the thin lines of this star here because that will bleed like crazy into the star and make it dark blue. Now if you find you do that, you can pick the star back out with a white gel pen. Of course that means you're left with a white star, but there you can live with that. Stars are white. that's all the background done. Now I'll show you what I had in mind for the glow around her. This is another technique you can use when colouring in with markers and pencils. I'm going to choose a nice creamy yellow here, and making sure that the Sharpies are dry, and they're still drying down here, but they're pretty dry up the top. I'm going to just go around her and give her a little glow. Make her stand out a little bit. This works very well when you're colouring in a background with a darker coloured marker. Now all I'm doing is I'm sort of drawing a line around her and then gradually just spreading it out from her, so a nice soft glowy look you're looking for. Those little strands that have disappeared and bring them back out again. While we're at it, make sure those little stars have a little glow around them too. About it, let's make the moon glow too. I won't make it quite as big a glow as around her though, because I want her to be the thing that stands out. Okay, I think that's enough of the glow. I think I will colour in the moon. Okay, I think I'll go for a nice yellowish moon, but a very pale yellow. So let's go for one of the Tombos this time to see how water-based markers work on this. The initial colour I'm going to lay down for the moon will be a very light grey, which is the N89s in the Tombos. Make it kind of a cool looking moon. Now, as you can see here, colouring with watercolour markers is a little bit more difficult than with the alcohol markers. You can't get it quite as smooth, and it really depends. Some colours you can get down smoother than other colours. This isn't going too bad, but then I'm not working over a huge surface. Get better with the small areas. There's always a little bit of unevenness, watercolour markers. Now let's do the moon down the bottom here too. And it'll dry lighter than when you lay it down as well. It looks dark when you first put it down. Can't really go over the top of it too much because it'll start to lift the skin of the paper with water-based markers. Just don't play nice with this kind of paper. Not really designed for it. You can do it. And just really gently backfilling some areas that look a bit light. Doesn't want to lay down very flat, does it? It doesn't matter, we'll go over. It doesn't matter, it's a motley sort of a moon, so I'm going to shade it in a little bit more with some other colours. We'll leave that to dry, keeping in mind that the water-based markers take a lot longer to dry than the alcohol markers. Now I'm going to do her wings, and I think I will make the wings. I'm going to give her a costume that's going to be orangey yellow, I think, because I think the orange and the yellow will go well with the dark blue background. So the wings, I'm going to do really pale yellow on the wings, and I'll probably do it with the dress as well, because the wings and the dress, if you see here, are fairly similar in their design. So what I do on the wings, I'll echo on the dress. Okay, to start off with, I'll use this very pale yellow. Now again, if you haven't got pale colours, go and just use some pale colour pencils instead to do the same thing. And I'm not going to do the whole wing, I'm just going to outline around where these lines are in the wing. And under here too. And I'll do the same with the corresponding parts of the dress, which will be this main section here. Oops, where's those? Dry. I'm going to do the next section, the bottom of these wings here, and I'll make those a chrome orange. So I'll add that colour to it. I think I'll leave this little bit in the centre here. I'll leave them white. Oops, I missed a bit. Always miss a bit. So this section here along the edges of the wings, this last little section, and I'll just pat in this colour. can see with the orange, the whole picture is starting to come together. It's making the orange is a lovely contrast colour to the navy blue, and it's bringing the whole thing together and making it pop. It's a bigger area, so make sure that you work quickly, backfill, and don't let the edge dry before putting on the next line of colour to avoid having those nasty little lines of blotchiness, which you really want to try avoid. Much easier with alcohol markers than with the watercolour markers. Here. Now I'm going to go back now and start working on the shadows and highlights for the moon shape. I think with the shadows we might make it a little bit dusky dark. I think I'll just go the dark grey. Okay, this one is a 70 warm grey. Yeah, it's better. Now again, see how I've left a line of the lighter grey there, and I've just put the dark grey on top and then dark there at the base, and then fading it out as I go up. Do it on this side as well. Give her a bit of shading underneath her hand, very important, or else she'll just look like she's floating above it. And underneath her skirt where she's sitting. Now she looks like she's sitting on it and not floating above it. Deal darkest right next to her, right underneath her skirt there, and then getting lighter as you go away from her. Now I want to get the white Prismacolor, and these are wonderful. Even if you haven't got any other Prismacolors in yours at all, you should try and get hold of a white Prismacolor because it comes in so handy for highlights. And on the top of your moon, just put run a bit of a highlight, not quite at the top, but about would it be 1/6 of an inch or 1/2 centimetre down. Make a little blush in, a little highlight, give the moon more dimension. So I'll contrast here. Here's the moon that we've done at the bottom with the pencils, and this is where the beauty of mixing pencils and alcohol markers really works for me. That's the bottom bit. Now we'll contrast to the top bit that we haven't done. As you can see, that still looks a bit bland and a bit shape. It looks very one-dimensional. So we'll grab the darker pencil again, making it darkest right at the bottom, but reserving a little line of the grey, and just fading up a little bit. It's a little trickier when it gets thinner up here towards the point. So just stop where you feel comfortable. Don't go all the way to the point because it'll just make the point look like it's black or, you know, like it's really dark. might want a really sharp pencil to do that bit. But I've stopped here a good inch away from the end. Now grab your white pencil and again put a little streak of highlight in. Just again leaving a fraction of the grey at the top there. Yeah, that's much more interesting looking colouring in the moon. Okay, now her dress is nice and dry, so I think we can start working on that. And I'm just looking at those stockings of hers too and trying to decide what colour to do them. And I think I'll probably continue with the orange and the yellow, so we'll do that. Now get them out of the way so we can shade everything together. So here's my orange again, and coordinating all of her clothing. Now we want to add the shading and the highlights into this. So first of all, I like to start with shading again, and we need to pick, for the yellow, we need to pick a darker shade of that yellow. I'll go for the canary yellow to start off with, and I'll bring in a little bit of, it's actually brighter, it's not really much of a shadow, but it gives it more dimension, this one. It really depends on the individual colours you pick. Shade it. I'll leave the centre lighter and I'll just shade in down the bottom. And at the top. Leaving like a band of highlight across it. Of course underneath her here there's not going to be much highlight at all, so you can shade in most of it. Now I think it needs a little bit more of a shadow there. And a nice colour for shadow would be a blue, but no, actually no, you don't want to use blue because blue will make it look green. Don't use blue, forget I said that. I think I'm going to use the grey again as a nice neutral colour. And I'll go back to the warm grey. Now I'll bring in a little bit of shadow right at the top. Don't want too much or else the wing will look dirty. Just a little bit. Okay, let's do a skirt. And I want more shading at the top and the bottom of the skirt and leaving the middle bit a little bit more brighter and lighter. Same with the leggings here. You want the shading at the bottom, fading up, and at the top, but more shading down the bottom than at the top. Just a little line at the top and a thicker line down the bottom. And underneath the skirt, of course, you've got to cast the shadow of the skirt across it. So I'll just leave that little bit unshaded. Again, going into the grey, I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow under her knee, under her leg here. skirt. And just in the folds of her skirt up here. Now. Some highlights. I think I might take the white pencil and just add a little bit of a highlight here to the tops of the skirt here, just a tiny bit. There's not much room to work. And I don't think I'll do anything more with the wings and the skirt. I rather like it the way it is. I'll make it a little darker down here where it fades in over the corner. Oh, the yellow of the skirt. Now we'll work on the orange parts of the skirt and the bodice. Now with the shading for this, you could go a cool brown colour, or you could go a darker orange colour. Just experiment on your scratch piece and see what colour you prefer for the shadows. I'm going to try with a pale vermilion to start off with, which is a real pale, reddy orange. Breasts here, around the back here, now if we grab the white to put a highlight in, we need the highlight on top here, give her dimension, a bit of a blush. Around this top section here, because that's going to be the most exposed to the light. So I'd make that the lightest and then just blend it down. Same here, make that the lightest and then blend it down. Yeah, that's giving her some dimension there. Let's continue on with the rest. Same with the wings. This is mostly in shadow, so I'll just colour the rest of it. I think I'll colour that bit with the orange too, because that looks a bit odd the way it is. Few minutes to dry before I touch it with pencil though. Around here, and we'll do some more here, and just in the creases of the wings, and then blend out to the centre. And blending into the centre there, and leaving this part its original orange colour. Now once again, get your white and just in the centre there, blush in a bit of the white for a highlight. And we'll do the same with the leggings and the rest of the skirt. So the leggings, just a bit of the shading on top. A bit more underneath. And this little bit here, just a teeny bit, we don't need much. In terms, and that bit there, I almost forgot that bit there. With your white, again, give it a highlight. Lightest at the top, sort of like, and then a little bit like blended in as you go down the leg. And finally, because I've used the grey there, I just want to put a little bit of grey here too. I'm not pressing hard, I'm just really just blushing it in and using the layering to increase the depth of the, or the darkness instead of pressing. Yeah, There's her leg. Now we'll finish off the skirt. Same idea with the wings, just in the folds there, near the lines, you make it the darkest, and then just blend it up into the orange. And get your white and the highlights just in the center. That really makes that skirt look like it's rounded now. All the little ripples in the skirt pop out. Now let's think. This white piece here, these little white bits look odd now because they don't have any shading. So we'll choose a colour to shade them in. I think I'm going to stick with the grey, but I'll go with the lighter version of it. So I don't want it too dark. So I'll go with the warm grey 50%. And I just want to knock a few little shadows just in the creases there, so that this skirt also looks like it's got a 3D kind of feel to it. And the belt as well. I've decided I want to leave the belt white. And this little lace, just very gently, every so often pop a little blush of the grey in. To give it that 3D effect. Now I'll do the same for the wing, again just in the corners. And on this, the lace on the bodice. Hey, she's come together quite nicely now, isn't she? I think we're getting close to finishing. I'd like to put some colour into these little love hearts here, and I think as a contrast I'd like to do them bright pink. And pop them in with this pink Sharpie. And you've got to be really careful with the Sharpies, that'll bleed all over the place. So just go close to the edge and just really lightly tap in. Not quite, but to the edge, and then tap in any little white spots, so that you're being very careful that it isn't going to bleed into your other colouring. Just about finished. I might do that star in her hair, the pink too. I'll pop pink on the inside and I'll do some yellow on the outside, I think. these little stars around her here, I might just add some yellow too. So I don't know, I don't really like them white. Let's bring them out with some yellow.
I think I need to shade some of this yellow. Go with the canary yellow, and I'll do a little bit of shading around this star. Oops, I've missed a star. I'll just colour that in with this. I'm just doing this around the base of the stars to make them pop a little bit better. I did say I was going to show you what I was planning to do with the black marker, and I don't know how it's going to work here, but I'll give it a go. What I want to do is give a sparkly effect, and I'm going to do that by putting a little sparkle of black on first and then going over the top with a sparkle of white gel pen. And we'll see how we go. I want to pop this on the bodice, so you're probably going to scream, but I am going to dot all this all with some black. Not very many, and mostly in the shadows. Doesn't matter what type of marker you use for this. You're not going to go over with any more wet media, so it doesn't matter. This is a Derwent Graphik marker. Graphic with a K at the end, that is. Right. But any marker, and that's a 0.3, but any marker that'll leave a nice little dot will do. Now, take your white gel pen, make sure it's behaving itself on another piece of paper before you start, and now add some white sparkles. And this time concentrate on the lighter parts of the bodice. And put a little bit over where you've got the darker ones too. How's that? Looks really sparkly now. Okay, that worked well. Let's try it with the other sections where we've got the orange colour. So on this side of the wings too, again concentrate your black dots around your darker areas where you've got that dark orange pencil. A couple there in the light section, but not many. Concentrate mainly around the dark areas, because that's more of your shaded area. We didn't actually shade that bit, did we? And add your white. Again, concentrating mainly around your lighter areas. can use on just about any drawing where you want some sparkle. Now we've done that bit, let's do her skirt. And of course you don't just use these techniques in this book, but experiment using these techniques in any book that you've got. So with the alcohol markers you have to be mindful of the bleed through, so perhaps stick with your single-sided books and you know, use the technique on flowers or leaves or butterflies or anything else that you can think of, or technical stuff if you like. You can make a sparkly robot if you've got a picture of a robot to colour in. Or if you're doing a very fancy looking fantasy cat, you can make a sparkly cat. Very sparkly looking. I might add some sparkles to her star up here. You can just sparkle a little bit outside the lines too. Good bit of fun. Yeah. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to call her almost done. Looking at her now, I think I just need a little bit more shading and highlight on her skin. So I'm going to go back to the skin. First of all, I'll add the shading to this part of the arm that I forgot before, because you will always forget something. I remember showing my father-in-law a beautiful double page spread that I did in Enchanted Forest, and I was very proud of it. And the first thing he said to me is, "You missed a bit," and he was right. He pointed out a piece that I had completely forgotten about. It was just a tiny little piece. Sharp eyes, that man. Okay, now I want to do a little bit of shading on her skin, a bit more, because I'm not 100% happy with it. I might go with the French grey for it, I think. Alright, so just in the absolute corners everywhere, underneath her chin. This is the French grey 17% in the Prismacolors. I use all different sorts of colours for shading skin. For realistic skin I like the dark, very dark desaturated blues. But in fantasy skin you can pretty much go for broke. So I'm just touching in a little bit of shade here and there, underneath the bodice, around the back. Everywhere that I had a bit of shade before, I'll just make it a little bit less than what I had before. A little bit of, you know, what was that other colour? That was the original colour we used for shading, the peach, and now the 70% French grey. French grey is a lovely warm grey. It's good for this kind of thing. That's better. Happy with that. finally, I want to add a few little highlights to her skin. So I'm going to use the white again, and I'll just, again, the same sort of idea that we did with the moon, where we had like the shadow and then we had the little highlight, but didn't go quite to the edge of the moon. And the same here, we're going to add a highlight on the upper part of her arm, but I'm not going to go to the edge. I'm just going to blush in a little bit down the centre there, like that. Fairly delicate application, but it'll add a little bit more dimension to her arm. I'll just avoid the crease of her arm there, the joint, because that would dip in a bit naturally and you wouldn't see any, well, you wouldn't see as much highlight there, so I'm not going to put a highlight there. A little bit on her belly here, the uppermost surface, and on her, just underneath her neck, and on the upper surface of this arm too. You can see I'm still leaving that border there of the original colour. A little bit on her neck there, and definitely on her forehead. Just blushing a little bit in the centre there, just underneath where the part is, and on her nose as well, and maybe just underneath her cheeks, and a little bit on her chin. Okay, let's have a look what we got. And that concludes this tutorial on how to use markers and coloured pencils together to have a bit of fun in your colouring books. I hope that you've learned a bit here and you'll use it to apply these techniques to other types of colouring books and other types of colouring and see what you can come up with. Until next time, have fun with whatever colouring adventure you are currently on, and happy colouring! You're enjoying any colouring adventures that you are currently on, and until next time, happy colouring!